There we go. All right, everybody, welcome to Wednesday Night Slides number 60. Um, Tonight's program is going to be some local stuff, the little local stuff I've done lately with the surgery and everything, plus a trip from 2009 we'll get to in a few minutes here. Let me just get my screen share going, and we shall get into this if I can find the right screen to share. I think this is it. Everybody seeing the title slide?
Yes, sir.
All right.
You got it.
Once again, if you have any comments or questions during the program, feel free to jump in. The easiest way to jump in is to unmute yourself, is to hit the space bar on your computer. That will unmute you, ask your question, make your comment, and release the space bar. All right. We're going to go back to New Year's Eve. We're to open the show up. The Friends of Philadelphia Trolleys ran their annual New Year's Eve trip, and it started unofficially out of the Callow Hill Depot in West Philadelphia. Here you see SEPTA Kawasaki card number 9014, decorated for Christmas. Operator Gary Mason decorates trolleys for some of the big holidays, including Christmas. And he came up with the Coca-Cola trolley this year. We're at the Callow Hill car barn here. Off to the right is one of the SEPTA PCC3s, one of the rebuilt ones. They've been out testing on Route 15. Hopefully they'll be coming back pretty soon. SEPTA is trying to get 200 hours of testing on each car before they open up the route again, but hopefully any time now. So off we went on our New Year's Eve trolley. We left Callow Hill about 8:30. The official start point was the loop at 63rd and Malvern in West Philadelphia, near Overbrook. And at 9 o'clock, and then off we went for our New Year's Eve trip. Just some different shots. We did find one Coca-Cola sign hanging. To get the Coca-Cola trolley with a Coca-Cola sign. Reportedly, this sign has come down since the trip ran back on New Year's Eve. So we're lucky to get this. Here we are at the 40th Street portal that goes into the Center City Tunnel. And coming out of the other tunnel portal on the Route 10. This is actually part of Route 15. We're on Girard Avenue. We had a couple of handheld studio lights that were deployed by a couple of volunteers to light up the row houses in back of the streetcar. Worked out pretty well. And coming back into 63rd and Malvern at the end of the trip. This is in the loop at 63rd and Malvern. And then heading back down to Callow Hill to put the car away. Christmas scene here with a snowman in the background. All these shots are handheld. It's amazing what modern cameras can do these days. And on some cobblestones, heading back into Callow Hill. And coming into the Callow Hill Depot. This is the shot that I took with my Nikon D750. And then I also shot this with my cell phone. Cell phone is a little, well, I'd say sharper, but not in necessarily a nice way. Just a little too sharp, maybe. I don't know. But that's just a little bit of a wider angle lens, though. So that's the comparison there. And that was the conclusion of the New Year's Eve trip at about 1 o'clock on New Year's morning. And here's a poster that was hanging up in the car. The fellow on the right is Gary Mason. He's the operator that decorated the car and had the poster made up. And Pretty impressive. So we're going to jump ahead now to February 10th. Still car number 9014. It still has the red wrap on it that Gary applied to decorate it for Christmas. But now Gary's got the car decorated for Valentine's Day. This is Super Saturday Streetcar Special number 30, which is sponsored by the Wilmington chapter of the NRHS every year. And I put the trips together for the chapter. Although this year, because of I couldn't do a whole lot, I just sort of sat on the car and rode and let a couple of other guys, including Bill Monahan and John Gabriel, handle the photo stops. Here we are at the 40th Street portal. We do have fun with the destination signs on these trips. This was my 30th trip. So here we have Steve's trolley coming up to 40th Street. We went into the subway. Here we are at 30th Street. And you go all the way into City Hall, well, 13th Street, and come back out again the other direction. And another stop in the tunnel. Some of the track work. I was able to get off for about half the photo stops, the first half. I did start to wear out about halfway through the trip. Plus, I wasn't moving very fast. So I wound up actually sitting out some of the photo stops. First time ever for me doing that. Excuse me. That was kind of weird, but here we are crossing over the Pennsylvania Railroad, not the main line, but the media Elwyn line. This is Mount Moriah Cemetery. There's a turnback loop there. In the background is the gatehouse to Mount Moriah Cemetery. This cemetery was pretty much in disrepair for quite a few years, many years. There's now a friends group that's trying to maintain the cemetery. They've cut the grass, they're maintaining it, and they've kind of shored up what's left of the gatehouse as best they could, but it's in pretty rough shape. Here we are with a regular service streetcar coming up behind us. This is on the diversion trackage. This is trackage that SEPTA only uses on weekend nights when they're doing maintenance on the Center City Tunnel. And then there's about 2 weeks in the summer when they're doing the maintenance splits, they'll use this trackage. I noticed the destination sign now says Los Angeles. This is also on the diversion trackage. There are a couple, I guess there's 3 total Valentine's Day cars that were out in SEPTA. Maybe just 2. Anyhow, Gary's car, the one on the right that we were using, that's based out of Callow Hill, and runs on the Route 10 usually. On the Elmwood side, another operator has decorated a Valentine's car, and we caught up with that at the Aiden Loops. We had the 2 Valentine's cars side by side. And this is between Yaden and Darby. A couple of hitching posts along the street. Because it was my 30th and my last trip, I'm retiring from running streetcar trips. It was my 30th and last trip operating them from the Wilmington chapter. The chapter presented me with a really nice painting done by Peter Lero II, who is the artist. The Pete Lero, who's the photographer, is actually Pete Lero III. but the chapter commissioned a 30th anniversary Super Saturday painting with 4 of the cars that we used over the years. On the left is PCC painted for Red Arrow. We used that back in the 1990s. In the middle is a PCC2, the 2320. We use PCC2s quite a bit. The 2320 we used twice over the years. Plus, we used it once before it was rebuilt. It was before it went to Brookville, it became a PCC2. We used it as a straight PCC on one trip. Next to it is the Peter Witt car, which is now up in Scranton. We used that 3 times before SEPTA retired it. And then we used Kawasaki cars a few times also. And on the far right is Kawasaki 9043, I believe it was. That was wrapped for the 125th anniversary of electric streetcar service in Philadelphia. And we used that car on our 25th anniversary trip way back when. Anyhow, the chapter gave me the original painting. I have that here. And we have prints available. And I believe the chapter is going to make those available for sale at some point. So if anybody wants a print signed by the artist, we'll have those available. And I'll post that on Facebook when that happens. The only non-train thing I've done over the last 2 months is I went to W.Va, believe it or not. I was over across the river in Folsom, Pennsylvania, which is just below Philadelphia, between Philadelphia and Chester. And over there is a new super W.Va with the gas pumps and everything. For those not familiar with W.Va, it's the local convenience store. It has a cult following in most of New Jersey, eastern Pennsylvania, most of Delaware. And then they're spreading southward down to Florida. And they're now beginning a big expansion into the Midwest and Ohio and places like that. Anyhow, the very first W.Va was located in Folsom. And there's a plaque honoring the very first W.Va, opened in 1964. And the original sign now sits in front of this new super W.Va, which is located about a half a mile from the spot where the original was located. The original was gutted and is now a bank, but they preserved the sign and moved it here to this new location. All right, so much for non-train stuff. Now back to the trains. And we're going to go on a trip I took with my brother Bruce back in 2009. We had some good weather in the forecast, and there were some things I wanted to do out in the Midwest, Indiana, Kentucky area. So I put together a trip that involved 5 railroads over 3 days, and everything had to run just right to hit everything. So it was a bit of a jigsaw puzzle to put together. We left on a Sunday morning and headed out for the first stop in Uniontown, Pennsylvania, where the short-lived tourist railroad, the Fayette Central, was running. The Fayette Central was a really cool tourist operation using a Baltimore and Ohio rail diesel car that was leased from the B&O Railroad Museum. And we knew we were going to miss the first run, but what I really wanted to do was go out and shoot the second run because there's street running in Uniontown. So we got there, and the first run was already out, which we figured it would be. So we started doing some scouting. We found the street running and followed it, only to discover that the street running dead-ended at a lumber yard. It was not part of the main line. I'm like, oh, crap. Now what? So we went, and when the RDC got to its beginning point there in Uniontown, only about 3 people got off. It was opening weekend for the railroad in the spring and May. Only about 3 people got off. So we talked to the crew, and I said, yeah, I really wanted to get the street running. And they're like, well, today is opening day. We didn't advertise it very well. And if nobody shows up, we'll take you out to the street running. We're like, okay. Nobody showed up. So it was just me and Bruce on the RDC. We did a photo stop here on the bridge. And then we did photo stops down the street. Like I said, this is really cool because this railroad, the RDC has been returned to the B&O Museum. The tourist railroad is gone because freight traffic picked up on this short line. And there was no room anymore to run the passenger trains. But this was just really cool. Like I said, we had our own private photo charter down the street here.
Yeah, Steve, we did this on a Bart Jennings photo charter.
Yeah. Did he use the RDC or did he use the diesel and the cabooses?
We used the RDCs.
Yeah. We finished up in Uniontown. We still had a long way to go. We needed to get out to Bloomington, Indiana that night. The first railroad, the first freight railroad in the jigsaw puzzle, our second railroad, was going to be the Indiana Railroad's train from Bloomington down to New Albany, Indiana, just across from Louisville, Kentucky. Here's their what else they use on the Fayette Central. They also use this B&O switcher and the cabooses for passengers as well. Okay, so we got out to
Steve,
yeah.
going back to the RDCs there for a minute.
Yeah.
When was that trip? That was it Jersey Central that or somebody that you were on, I know, and
Yeah.
I met Jim Fetchero and we went up to Connellsville.
Yes, I forget who sponsored that trip. I was on that. Yeah, it was a good trip though. So anyhow, the train leaves out of Bloomington, but the first thing I wanted to really get was the street running in Bedford, Indiana. So rather than risk chasing it out of Bloomington, we just set up in the street in Bedford and waited for the train to come down. And this would be one of the all-time great chases. Some really cool stuff because this train was heading for the last major stand of semaphore signals in the eastern United States on the former Monon Railroad. So off we went from Bedford. This is the first set of semaphores at Orleans, North Orleans, actually. And then other end of the siding, this is at South Orleans. This is an unusual set of semaphores here. This is at Leipzig. Because of the curve, they put the semaphores for both directions on the same side of the railroad. Another semaphore between Leipzig and Saltillo. Fortunately, track speeds weren't really fast here, in large part because the semaphores tended to malfunction. So because they were ancient by this time, and some of them had their copper stripped out. So it was a fairly easy chase to get all these semaphores. This is in Saltillo. This is in Hitchcock. Wasn't sure how to shoot this. I wanted to do a little bit tighter on the house, but I was afraid of cutting off that phone pole and just having the arms of the phone pole sort of sticking out in the upper right-hand corner of the photo. So I shot it wide like this to include the entire phone pole and the tree and the house and the semaphores. Nice thing about digital photography is you're not stuck with the composition that you shot. I went back in and cropped things down a little bit, and this is the cropped version. Oops, I forgot to break down where this was. Nice courthouse, though, in the background.
I think this might have been Salem, Indiana. I
Salem
could be
sounds
wrong
right.
there.
Salem sounds right. Next set of semaphores was at Farabee. No semaphores in this shot here, just a nice scene. Then we have a couple of searchlight signals at North Pekin. This railroad is gone now. This was a CSX line. By this time, CSX had pulled out almost entirely from it. The Indiana Railroad was the only thing running on it on trackage rights. I went back in and looked up this location on Google Street View recently. And the roadbed is just torn up rails at this point. But those last time the Google car went through, those searchlights were still standing. Then we have some median running where the trains run down the middle of a street, but not in the street itself, but on a right of way in the middle. This is in Borden, Indiana. Also in Borden. Great chase. Semaphores, street running, good paint scheme on the lead locomotive. It's one of those really great chases. Then we finished up with even more street running down in New Albany. So bunches of semaphores, two sets of street running, median running. Yeah, just one of the really, really, really great chases. From here, we had a couple of hours to kill because our next short line we wanted to do, theoretically had a train that left from near New Albany in the late afternoon. So we spent some time along Norfolk Southern in New Albany. You got this shot here. And then headed over to the Louisville and Indiana for our next chase. And sure enough, they were running. Late afternoon departure heading north. This is in Cementville. Obviously an ex-Pennsylvania Railroad line because the bridge proclaims the Pennsylvania Railroad. And this train was heading north towards Columbus, Indiana. Fortunately, the late afternoon sun had swung around enough to light up the nose on most of these shots here, even though it's a northbound train. Going past the church in Underwood, Indiana. Oops. And then past the ex-Pennsy station in Austin, Indiana. Sun's getting lower and lower. And we finally broke off this chase at the cemetery in Jonesville, Indiana. From here was back down to the New Albany area for the night. The next morning's target was going to be the Indiana Southern Railroad, which theoretically ran in the mornings, serving a cement plant in Speed, Indiana. And they were theoretically going to take cars over to CSX over at Watson, Indiana. So next morning we get up, head over to Speed, and sure enough, the Indiana Southern is out and running. Here they are working the cement plant. A couple of locomotives built by the American Locomotive Company, ALCO, but repowered with Cummins engines. Unfortunately, both of these engines were scrapped a couple years ago. The cement plant shut down. And that was the only customer on the railroad, pretty much. We spent the morning up in Speed watching them go back and forth. The golf course is right up against the railroad here. And we went out on one of the cart paths around this green here to get some shots. And no one seemed to mind. The golfers were out. We clapped politely whenever they sunk a putt here. Unfortunately, there were a couple of golfers out to add to the scene as the train was switching through here. Finally, they had their train together, kind of head over to Watson. Here they are with their loads from the cement plant heading out. This is an old interurban line, and if you look at the map, it really squiggles and winds. Apparently, the track is still here. Louisville, Indiana, which also runs through Speed right next to the Indiana Southern, took it over. I'm not sure what they're doing with it. And here we are at the interchange with CSX in Watson. And then here's a CSX train that went through while we were there. So the Indiana Southern ran when it was supposed to. That was when including the Fayette Central tourist operation. That was 4 out of 4 railroads that cooperated. I had one more railroad on the list that theoretically would run on this afternoon, but it was quite a ways away, a couple of hours away, the Transkentucky Transportation Railroad. And because it was so far away, I thought, you know what, rather than risk driving over there, maybe I should give them a call first. So I called. I looked up their number, gave them a call. Nice lady in the office answered. I explained to her that I wanted to go and get pictures of the train. I asked if they were running that day. She said, hang on for a second. And she went out, looked out the window, came back. She said, yep. She said, looked out the window. You got a train sitting here ready to go. We're going to run later this afternoon. I'm like, cool. So off we went to Paris, Kentucky for our last railroad, the Transkentucky Transportation. It runs coal loads from Paris up to the old Chesapeake and Ohio, CSX up in Maysville, Kentucky. And to get the coal loads out of Paris, they run with engines on both ends. Head end locomotives and pushers. The sun was best for the pushers. So a lot of this stuff is the rear end of the train. So here we see the pushers going away, actually, going past the Bourbon Drive-In in Paris. Next up, once again, a going away shot of the back pushers in Millersburg. This is the head end, the front of the train in Carlisle. And also the head end of the train going through Myers. Next up is Flemingsburg Junction. Station is still there. This is the head end rolling by, going north. And then the rear end going away. By this time, the engineer on the rear end noticed we were chasing, and he turned on the ditch lights. So all of our shots going away looked like the train was coming at us. So that was kind of cool. Once again, a going away shot of the rear pushers. And this is just south of Maysville. Got to Maysville, which is right on the Ohio River. The train had to go out on the CSX, push back to a power plant, drop off the coal loads, and pick up empties. So here we see the train on the old CNO on CSX. That's the Maysville Amtrak station in the off to the right there. This is a place the locals call the birdhouse because it's a house with bird houses actually. And this is now pushing back into the power plant. This is the head end, but which is now going away, pushing back, going through the flood wall in Maysville. And the loads being pushed back to the power plant. So we had some time to kill here while they swapped their train out for the empties. Went over to the Amtrak station, found the CSX power sitting there. Here's the Amtrak station, ex-CNO. And from the inside. And I shot this moniker. Monikers are artwork done by railroad employees, usually with a grease pen of some sort. Wish I had shot more of these when they were around. This is a Conrail Twitty. I've got a couple of Conrail Twitties that I've shot. Unfortunately, I never shot some of the really classics. I never shot Herbie, but I can find in my collection anyhow. Never shot Bozo Texino, Colossus of Rhodes. I really wish I had paid more attention to these back in the day. They're different than graffiti. Graffiti is done by supposed artists who aren't associated with the railroad, but all these monikers are done by railroad employees, and the great ones would do their artwork on thousands of rail cars over the years. Pretty impressive. Okay, our train's back together, heading back south again to Paris. It's all empties now, so all the power is up front. TTI ran with these great old GEs. They really sounded good. Unfortunately, TTI no longer runs. There's been a washout on the line. Coal stopped running. So this line is now largely, I don't know if it's been officially abandoned or not, but it's certainly unused right now. And all the GEs have been disposed of.
Lately, it seems they've been using it for car storage. Say
Yeah,
a couple times a year, they'll go out. They usually keep 2 engines running, but besides the car storage, it's just them switching out the transflow facility around Paris.
yeah. Yeah, it's not much going on here anymore, unfortunately. And we finished up right at sunset at Carlisle. So now we had to get home. Everything had worked out. 5 railroads, they all ran like they were supposed to. Some great chases. Now it's time to go home. I hadn't really thought that far ahead. I'm like, okay, what do we do tomorrow? The sun's going to be out. So since we were on the old CNO up in Maysville, I thought, well, hey, let's just follow the CNO over and hit the new River Gorge. That's always a cool place to go. So the next morning found us in Thurmond, West Virginia, in the new River Gorge. Old town, mining town, coal town, that's been taken over by the National Park Service. One of the reasons we're going to Thurmond was because we knew it was a day the Cardinal ran. The Cardinal runs 3 times a week. Got there on a Cardinal day, so we knew we wouldn't get skunked. We'd have at least something to shoot. And sure enough, the Cardinal came through, passing underneath the classic Chesapeake and Ohio style signals. Now, that's the main street there on the right-hand side with storefronts facing right out on the tracks in downtown Thurmond. Classic C&O style signals. These are gone now. And this is Main Street in Thurmond, looking up towards the depot. And we got a freight, so that was kind of cool too. So we've done pretty much all we needed to do in Thurmond. So we headed over to Prince, West Virginia. By rail, Prince is about 11 miles away. There is a road between Thurmond and Prince that you can drive, maybe. But it's not recommended.
Tried it once, didn't get very far.
Yeah, no, it's not recommended. You may or may not make it to Prince if you take the road over the mountain. So we took the long way around on paved roads and got down to Prince. Prince is the home of as an Amtrak stop, a former Chesapeake and Ohio passenger depot, built in the fairly late 1930s. It's Art Deco. It's pretty cool. And it's got this Chessie kitten in the floor. So here's the inside of the Prince Depot with a train going by outside. And here's the Art Deco depot with the nice lettering up on the canopy roof. Train going east. Not far from Prince is Quinnamont, which is the location of a fairly significant coal yard. And also some more of the C&O style signals. C&O had those really cool cantilever signals. The gantries are really, really neat with the lattice work and everything. We wound up staying here longer than I wanted to. Just west of the Prince Depot, the main line makes a right-hand turn and goes through Stretcher's Neck Tunnel. But right where the main line goes to the right, a branch line breaks off and goes to the left and crosses the New River. And we knew this train, somehow we knew this train was coming in great light across the New River. So we stuck around a bit longer than you really wanted to. Still a long drive to get home. But we got this train crossing over the New River. And back to the depot because another train was coming. Normally I wouldn't do a shot like this, but I like the way the shadow of the lettering was on the platform there. And once again, back inside the Prince Depot as the train goes by. That's going to wrap it up for this week. Next show is going to be on March 27th. I'm going to wrap this up for the YouTube folks, although I don't remember hearing that the recording had started, so maybe I didn't record this. Oh, well. Anyhow, next show is March 27th, and that will do it for this week.